Hi, podcasters. Welcome to the Changeapreneurs episode number 9. We are a team of coaches around the world and we spark change with our conversations. Today, we have as our host my co host, Shirish, and our guest, Saiba Bharadwaj. She is a nutritionist with 10 plus years of experience, has done a master's in nutrition science and research policy from Tufts University of Boston, lifestyle medicine, CMA certification from Harvard Medical School. That's some great qualifications, Saiba. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure and honor to be here on this platform.
So, to begin with, we have some interesting show planned for you today, and we want to know a little bit about your childhood, how were you as a child, and something about some interesting stories about that first.
I have an older sibling, so I'm the second child. So, rebellious, more risk taking and outgoing, so to say, more adventurous. But also, I think as a child, I I have been an introvert, and so I've always spent a lot of time with myself alone. I don't have a
Mm-hmm.
very huge, large circle of friends. I've always had a few people that I like to spend time with. It's very selective in
Okay.
my exchange of energy. But yeah, I was
Mm-hmm.
very active. I was into sports. I was into, all extracurricular activities. I was good in academics. So yeah, I mean, I have had a happy childhood.
That sounds amazing. So, to follow your question, since you're into nutrition and food and everything, how was your relationship with food when you were a child?
I think it was beautiful. We did not have, I mean, I did not have love hate relationship with food. I enjoyed food. But I've never been like, a foodie, so to say, or I don't, live to eat, but I eat to live. So when it, and I don't have a sweet tooth, which is a blessing. Um, so life has been good. I mean, I used to enjoy my food. I come from a family where non-vegetarian options are always available. So
Mm-hmm.
and my maternal grandparents' house, we used to visit them once a year in our summer holidays. They had their own farm. They had their own buffaloes, cows. So all this grass-fed milk and butter and all of those options, we've grown up with eating all of that.
Okay, all right, all right. So, Shirish,
Yeah, so how did you get into this nutrition field of nutrition?
So that's a very interesting story. I had a master's in mass communication. I was in advertising earlier. I also worked with Miss Nandita Das as her creative assistant. But once I conceived my daughter. It was a high risk pregnancy, so I was asked to kind of not work out and just take it lightly and slow. Once I had gestational thyroid. I was diagnosed with that. But once
mm-hmm.
I delivered my baby, it's a very different feeling for a mother, for a first time mom, because your worldview completely changes. There's suddenly this little baby in your arms, and you forget everything about yourself. So I stopped taking the medication, assumed that, okay, now the baby is out. So, all the problems are taken care of. And my doctor also forgot to tell me that I had to continue taking my thyroid medication. I kept piling on weight and I was doing everything that was told to me to kind of, would help me drop weight. But I put on 10 to 11 kgs in the next 5 months. And I had chronic fatigue and I had depression. I hated the way I looked because I put on so much weight. I had pigmentation on my face. I stopped socializing. I didn't know how to dress. I didn't, sadly, and because I only have one child, I have very limited photographs with my child because I refused to get clicked because I used to not like the way I looked. After 5 months, my thyroid was detected, and the TSH levels, the normal range that you may notice is between 0 to 5. And for optimal functioning, we want it to be below 2, but mine was 95. So
Gosh,
immediately I was put on medication, and the doctor said that, I'm surprised that you know, you're still alive and standing in my clinic.
Wow.
So and that time, it again hit me that, okay, I have hypothyroidism, and he told me that there's a possibility that you may not be able to get off this medication now because your TSH levels are grossly elevated.
Mhm.
The first thing was whoever I interacted with, people who had hypothyroidism, were overweight. So it kind of hit me that this is how I'm going to look or be all my life. But then one of my maternal aunts, I was talking to her and I was depressed and crying. And I told her that I have hypothyroidism and I'll never be able to lose weight. And she was into fitness at that time. She told me, she said, so what? Even I have hypothyroidism. That was the changing moment in my life, which is when I decided that no matter what, I'm going to drop this weight. It took me 2 years and went to several dietitians, popular ones in Delhi. And I noticed that nobody was paying attention to my medical condition. Nobody was paying attention to my food preferences or my lifestyle. It was all about what was convenient to them. So if Shirish, since you also have a background in nutrition, you would know there are certain dietitians, they will give you a moong dal day or they will give you a besan day. So, there's just besan in every meal. There's a paneer day. And I used to not do well with paneer, but nobody was listening to me. I did drop weight, but I ended up with a lot of skin issues. I dropped 30 kgs in 2 years. I was very consistent, but a lot of health problems came along with that. Then when people started asking me, how it is when you see a transformation, friends and family, they start approaching you that, can you help us? Can you help us? That's when I decided that it's a good option or a good field. I would want to help people, but I don't want to do it when I don't have the knowledge base. So I took a step back. I started studying again. I started exploring. I found this really good master's program in Boston. It was a blended program, but I was not eligible for it because I came from a commerce background. To make myself eligible for a year, I did all college level science programs from University of Berkeley. Made myself eligible for this program, then enrolled, and then I completed this in 2 years. So because for me, the problems or struggles that I went through, wherein nobody was paying attention to my medical conditions, my food preferences, people who did not have any knowledge, they were just copy pasting diets from the internet or here and there. I didn't want to do that. So that is how I got into nutrition, and I have continued so far.
Wonderful.
Oh.
That's some story. Yeah.
Simon, I'm curious to know, you mentioned that, how you were not into copy pasting diets and, this was something that you did not intend to do and how people were doing it. So there is always this way of people are trying to save money, in order to kind of copy paste diet because someone has lost weight and, oh, it might work for me. What advice would you have for them?
But that it never works. It will work in the short run, but it never works in the long run. The weight will come back, or you will end up with some or the other health issues. Because, for instance, I'll tell you how I function, and I take up only limited number of people every month because I want to give one-on-one attention to each person that enrolls with me. And every diet plan, every week which I make is a customized diet plan, and there are a long list of questions that are asked, a long update which is taken every week, and then the diet or the nutrition plan is planned. So now, if for instance, if Shirish comes to me, he comes from a different background. He's had a different upbringing. He has different food preferences. His age is different. His gender is different. His lifestyle might be different. So the food that is planned for him will not work for you, right? But if you try to save money and try to do it, either one thing you will say, बहुत boring खाना है, the food is very boring because it might not be as per your palate. Or you might
Yeah.
say, it's maybe he works and he doesn't have a cook, right? So we are giving him a lot of options which he can do, like, for a subscription meal plan. So you might say that, oh, I don't have access to this, but I want to eat home cooked food. So that might not work. Also, his nutritional needs might be different from your nutritional needs. So if you copy paste his diet plan, you might end up with some nutritional deficiencies. So it
Okay.
never works. I mean, and I always tell my clients this, that if you save money here, you will end up paying the money to some doctor or hospital. So it's
Yeah.
better to, prevention is always better than cure.
You're
I
doing an
just
investment in yourself. You're not spending money.
And I just had a conversation, and with with this couple, you can, I don't know if you want to include this or you want to edit it, but I want to tell you that these people who are in Delhi, and I know that I've known them for a long time. Come from a well-to-do family. Money is not an issue, and they are negotiating so much on the price for give us a couple discount, give us this. So I told them, I said, please don't negotiate so much for your health. Drink, a few less whiskeys next time when you go out and compensate. I mean, that it's going to help you eventually. So, because we are both whiskey drinkers and we drink
Okay.
2 or 3 times a week, I was like, cut the whiskey out and you'll be able to pay for this.
So Saiba, here is a very interesting question that comes to my mind. Some people are habitual to have their drinks, they enjoy their drinks, but then some people are so stressed in their work life that they need to have a drink or two in the evening, otherwise they can't go off to sleep. So how do you handle such cases when they come to you?
So, with drinking and with smoking, I have noticed that you can advise them and guide them, tell them what is right, what is wrong, tell them elaborately what is happening to their body if they overdo it, and how does alcohol get metabolized, the kind of pressure it puts on your liver, how all other metabolism stops and fat deposition happens. They know everything. But smoking and drinking is one thing people will only give up if it comes to them from within.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell them, and so I do get heavy drinkers who drink 2 or 3 times a week, and they don't stop at 2 drinks. It's probably 4 to 5 drinks per night when they drink. So I try and tell them that choose your one night wherein you think that, okay, this is the day that I really want to let my hair down and enjoy my alcohol. So they usually choose, say, a Saturday or a Friday, and the rest 2 other days I tell them, can we please bring it down to from 4 drinks to 2 drinks. So it's not a jerk movement or a change for them. So and then we gradually bring it down, so they still know psychologically, okay, Saturday I am allowed to drink as much as I want, so okay, let me compensate a little on Wednesday. So very little small behavioral changes that you need to bring.
So another linked question that comes to my mind now, Saiba, is that you mentioned that you create a diet plan specifically for the person according to their lifestyle, age, gender, and all. But one of the major issues which I've heard housewives complain is that they can't cook for two types of meals, or they can't cook for a meal for one person and rest of the family a different meal. So how do you help them out in this?
So again, we give them the flexibility. I let them eat whatever is being cooked, but we control their portion sizes. So there's always, you count, how we design is, you figure out from their whatever we calculate their BMR, we calculate their TDE, which is total daily energy expenditure. We figure out how many calories do we need to remove to bring them in a calorie deficit. And I have a very strict policy. I don't go below 1300 calories for anyone. Even if there is a very, like a young person, even if we do a 1200 calories, it will only be for a week. And it has to be monitored, because, I'm just totally against doing low calorie diets. So we try and increase the calorie deficit through, say, increasing physical movement in the house. We tell them that, okay, if you're on a call, just keep pacing around in the house, so your NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, that goes up. So that helps increase the calorie deficit. So you have to give them some sort of flexibility. And the regular food, if they're making for the family, if it's home cooked food, you're at least controlling the produce, you're controlling the amount of oil, you're controlling the kind of oil that you're using in your cooking. So all of that is controlled and measured. So they tend to drop weight, and then we figure out what are the in-between munching that they do. So you cut down on all of those.
Saiba, what I'm curious to know is you talked about your journey where you also lost 30 kgs in 2 years. And then you talked about certain clients who have, are drinking whiskeys and you're trying to, cut them out. So if you have to talk about your mindset, what was going on in your mind when you were on this journey? What helped you to be consistent? What are the tips and tricks that you can give to people that can help them be consistent in their weight loss journey?
So I gave up alcohol at that time completely.
Mm-hmm.
So for 2 years, I did not drink alcohol, and that actually really helps in dropping your weight. Now, another one very good benefit at that time was I was not a very heavy drinker anyway. I was pregnant for a whole year almost, and then you're breastfeeding, all of that. So you're as it is off alcohol. So it was very easy to kind of not include it in my lifestyle. Second was
Mm-hmm.
I was not socializing. Again, the benefit was I had a small baby, so it was a very good excuse to be at home all the time. So I stopped socializing. When you don't socialize, you are making sure that your food intake is proper and you have complete control over what you're eating. Thirdly, I was extremely consistent with my workout. Whether so I did join a gym, but then I was walking also in the evenings. So which is something that I have continued since then. So it's been like good now 14, 15 years, I would say. And that pattern has continued. Whether it was raining, whether it was cold, I was seen in the park with an umbrella walking. If I had to do it, I had to do it. And which is what I tell all my clients now. Also, people keep telling me about sending me these reels about Ozempic and weight loss with Ozempic. And I'm like, consistency beats Ozempic and any fat diets any day. You just have to be consistent. I think somebody posted asking about what is the magic diet. So there's no magic diet, but the secret ingredient is consistency.
Mhm.
What helps people be consistent?
You need to know the why you want to lose weight, why you want to get fitter. You need to have a clear answer to the why. Whether you're doing it for your own health, whether you're doing it to look better. That is, again, a very big motivator that I want to look better. I want to wear these kind of clothes. Young girls come and they tell me that, I want to dress like this. So keep that in mind. I tell them, I said, okay, then just picture yourself there and do it for that reason. Or people are getting married, people want to do it for their kids. A lot of people that I get who are in their 40s, they want to do it for their kids because now they feel that they don't have the energy to play with their kids when they come back home, or when they are going out on vacations, they are breathless when they are hiking, etc. So they want to get healthier and fitter for their kids. So keep the why in mind, and you have to motivate yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, Saiba, I've seen a lot of people face a lot of now, like you mentioned that you were lucky enough, you were at home with your baby, you were not socializing too much. But societal pressure, that challenge is too much when a person starts on the journey of transformation. Your friends make fun of you, your relatives force you to eat. And then when you lose weight and they tell you, see, you're looking weak, you're not looking healthy. So how does a person handle that kind of pressure, that societal pressure challenge? That's a huge challenge, actually.
So I tell I'm sorry for sounding very blunt or maybe borderline rude here, but I tell my clients that if your friends are making fun of you and if they're forcing you to eat or drink when you've told them categorically that you're trying to get healthier and fitter, they're not your true friends. Because a true friend is going to encourage you and tell you that, okay, just be on it, and why are you, derailing? So if people don't want, because and if you have, so there are two three things which I've seen in society. If you are surrounded by group of friends who are already um, even if not fit or healthy but skinny, so to say, they don't want you to drop weight because somewhere there is this fear that you may start looking better than them, right? So they want to pull you down. Or the second thing is they feel better about themselves because they are in your company and you don't look so good or you don't feel so good about yourself. So these people cannot be your true friends, right? When it comes to relatives forcing you, I have two, three strategies. First is to go there and just scan the menu and whatever snacks. And before you even eat, go to the host and say, "This is amazing. I've already had 2 servings." Host is not
Oh,
going to force you.
that's a new one. That's a new one, absolutely.
Yeah. So you just have to say this. I have told people it works. So, and if it's a big, like a buffet kind of a setup, then nobody's going to question. Just keep carrying a plate filled with some food, and whoever asks you, yeah, yeah, I'm eating. You don't really have to eat. They just want to see you with plate with everything, all the not so healthy food that is there. So you just pick your plate and roam around. It's very easy to do that. Or lastly, if it's like a very close family and they're forcing you to eat, have a small portion. Explain it to them that I'm trying to get fitter, but I will, because you've made it and you've put in so much effort, I will eat a small portion. So, respect that also. So, yeah, and I think there was one more that you mentioned. Or this is it, these two
Yeah,
things, right?
societal pressure. Actually, that is the pressure. And yeah, and when you lose weight, actually, when coming down by 20 kgs or 15 kgs,
Weak ho gaye ho.
yeah, weak ho gaye ho. You become weak. That's what.
So when people come and tell me that I've lost the glow on my face and everybody's
Yes.
telling me you're looking weak, and this really happens only in India. Huh? Let me tell you this. You're looking weak. And I asked them, I said, was that person overweight themselves? They're like, yeah. And it's usually the chachi or the bua or somebody, and who's overweight. I said, please don't listen to that person. If the person is a fitness enthusiast, working out, and has good muscles and has some knowledge about health and nutrition and fitness, if that person tells you you're looking weak, then you come and tell me.
So I'll resonate with that. So when I went by own transformation, and I said that, mentioned this to one of my friends, it's in Norway, that all my friends are telling me you become weak and all that. He said, everybody's stomach must be protruding out by 6 inches or 7 inches. Show me the picture. And that was the case. Actually, that was the case.
Even in the gym, Shirish, if you've seen this, people who come and give you, I don't know if it happens with men, but it happens a lot in India with women. If a woman is working out, some man thinks that it is his birthright to come and tell her, not asking her that what are you trying to do, or do you have any knowledge, since when are you working out. He just has to give his input, and that person will usually be somebody who's overweight with a stomach protruding out. And I just look at them, I nod, and I say, okay. And then I continue doing whatever I'm doing.
That's a fact. That's I've observed that. That's very true.
I love these facts about India because it gives us a good laugh.
Yeah.
There's a saying that it's like everybody's trying to be a professor in a subject they don't know about.
Actually, yeah, very good way to put it.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
sweet cravings, like how does a person manage that?
So see, again, now sweet cravings, if they happen once in a while, it's fine. But again, you have to be a little mindful. Aisa nahi hai that there is. So I don't have a sweet tooth, but I love gulab jamun, which is
Oh.
an Indian sweet. I have a box full of gulab jamun in the fridge, so it's not like I'll just pick up the box and devour the entire box. You have to be mindful. I choose my time when I know that and now I'm going to just enjoy this one gulab jamun and be done with it. So you have to be mindful of the portion size that you are including. Secondly, if you are, like with my clients, what I do is when they tell me that, okay, now it's winter time in North India. So gajar ka halwa is a very common sweet dish which is made in every household, so to say. So I do include it. And then we balance out the calories. So it's not like you can't eat or enjoy these foods. But if it starts happening on a regular basis, so you need to understand, are you consuming enough calories through the day, especially in the first half of the day when your body's glucose metabolism is higher? If you're not, so people who don't consume enough calories in the first half of the day end up having sweet cravings later on. Secondly, are you consuming adequate protein through the day? If your protein intake is low, you might end up having sweet cravings. Then you get your blood work done to see if there are any nutritional deficiencies which may be kind of making you crave sweets. Or is there some emotional problem or an emotion that you're trying to feed through these sweet cravings? Because you maybe there is something happening, there is some emotion or a void that you're trying to fill through that. Because when you do enjoy a sweet or some dessert, your good hormones are elevated for a short period of time and then they drop again, which is why you find yourself in a slump again. So it's a temporary fix, but a lot of people do this.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are averse to the idea. I get a lot of women who come and I ask them that what is this lack that you're trying to fill, and this question disturbs people, I have noticed,
Mm-hmm.
because there is definitely a lack, maybe lack of respect at home, lack of love, lack of, I don't know, trust or a feeling of belongingness. There is something which they're not ready, so they're in denial, they're not ready to accept it or address it.
Mhm. So what you're trying to say is that there's a lot of emotional involvement when you come to specifically when you say sweet cravings. As you
Yeah,
mentioned,
because
like
it
you.
immediately increases your good hormones. So you feel happy
Mhm,
for a
mhm.
little while.
That's a very interesting thing to kind of,
But
So,
reflect
exercise does
upon.
the same thing. So sometimes I tell people who are willing to change, and so we have like so if we talk about stress eating or emotional eating, first is awareness, bringing that awareness that okay, yes, maybe I'm stress
Mhm,
eating or maybe I'm an
mhm,
emotional eater. Second is to accept. That is a
mhm,
difficult stage. And third is to take action. Now, when you
mhm,
are taking action, we tell people that identify the triggers.
mhm,
Why are
mhm,
you stress eating, or why are you indulging in sweets? Are you upset? Is identify, is there a person that's triggering it, or a situation, or some sort of a place or a memory? What is it that triggers this emotion which makes you
mm-hmm.
so once you start identifying your triggers, then we tell them that, okay, you've identified, next time this happens, try going for a walk, come back, if you still crave it, then have it.
Basically, add it, replace it with a physical movement.
Yeah, because it does the same job.
Okay,
It
that's
brings the
interesting.
same relief actually.
Yes.
So,
Mhm,
so Saiba, when I was doing this course of nutrition, and we were taught that usually a person follows a diet plan for 3 years and then they go back to their old lifestyle, probably gain weight again, or probably put on more than weight. And you mentioned you've been like this for what, last 13, 14 years now. You've maintained it, you've been consistent. So, what helped you stay consistent for this long period of time?
So, diet as a word basically means what is it that you eat through the day. But it has earned a very bad or negative reputation because of the diet culture, wherein, they deprive you of foods and they starve you and all of that. So, people are
mhm,
like averse to this whole idea of dieting. So it's basically, it's diet means what is it that you eat through the day. So, if your diet is something which is balanced, and as per your food preferences and your cultural background, all of that, it's very easy to maintain. And there are certain lifestyle changes that you need to make. And also, I think it's to make it sustainable, there are a lot of things that you need to focus on. So diet is just one pillar, so to say, to good health. I
mhm,
usually tell people that there are five pillars, and the first one is sleep for me.
Hmm.
Sleep is the most essential. Second is hydration. Third is gut health. Fourth is diet or nutrition. And fifth is physical movement or exercise. In this order.
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So can
you
we
need,
repeat that once again just to kind of get it at final? So
so
we
sleep,
talking
you need
about
to
sleep.
prioritize your sleep first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
Second is hydration.
Mm-hmm.
And third is your gut health.
Yeah.
Fourth is your nutrition or diet,
Okay.
what you're
Mm-hmm.
eating, and fifth is physical movement. So
Wow. Okay.
when I'm in my first consultation, these are all the parameters that we look into, and then we understand that okay, this person, out of these five areas, this person is struggling with, say, nutrition and sleep. If somebody comes to me and has a sleep problem, that's our main focus. That first and
Hmm.
foremost, we have to correct this person's sleep pattern,
Mm-hmm.
because that's when all your recovery is happening. Even for your brain to recharge, you need to sleep, and your
Mm-hmm.
body
Mm-hmm.
to recover, your immunity to be high, you need to sleep and get a good. And
Mm-hmm.
when I say sleep, it's not the morning sleep, it's the night sleep. So you need to
Mm-hmm.
get a good night's sleep.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
this is a
Mm-hmm.
challenge which working women usually face because they have to cook food before they leave for work, come back, they're tired, they have to finish the household work, and their sleep suffers. And probably that is the reason why they actually face this problem of weight gain.
True, that is one one contributor. Again, I tell them that, please, just if you can hire a help, don't shy away. And I think now it's becoming a little better with men also pitching in, and in household chores, etc. So I think it's becoming better. Also, now you have, in at least in the metros, you have the option of these meal service subscription plans, which you can, kind of get all your meals at the start of the day, and then you're not cooking, but you're still eating clean.
Tara, you also have talked about, eating intuitive and living intuitively because that is something that you promote. Can you just explain us and elaborate a little bit about that?
So see, we're all born as intuitive eater. If you actually look at a baby, I don't know if you guys have kids. I know Inayat doesn't, but I'm sure you've seen your nephews and nieces, etc. That
Yeah.
a baby will cry. So the first thing the mother does is lifts the baby and says, maybe the baby is hungry, right? That's the first response. And you try to give the baby milk. Suppose you're bottle feeding the baby. The baby, once the baby is full, will throw the bottle off. And that is one thing that the doctors, the pediatricians also tell you that, yeah, a little bit should be left in the bottle. That's how you know the baby is full. We don't force feed the baby, no, pio, finish the bottle. We don't do that because we are respecting the baby that, okay, the baby is full now, it's thrown the bottle, baby is done, let's burp the baby and get on with
Yeah.
it. But as the child starts to grow, we stop honoring their hunger, we stop respecting their choices. When the child sits on the table, we tell them that no, this is the last bite, finish it, one more bite, you're not going to waste your food. So we start ruining their relationship with food, right? And that's how we start going away from our whole inner system, which keeps telling us about our hunger and satiety. So eventually you need to come back to it, right? But it's a process, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes people years and years to again understand that what is it that the body needs. And now as adults, I feel when you want to get back to intuitive eating, it's not just about the food. You need to figure out your emotional health as well, and your mental health, which is when you will be able to become a good intuitive eater, and you will be able to control that, okay, this is the time I'm hungry and this is the time now I'm full. Otherwise you will binge eat, or you'll say, okay, let me eat this also, let me eat this also. So it's a process. So initially, if you're trying to get into intuitive eating, so people who have a very poor relationship with food and are very scared of eating calories, right? With them, initially, when they start intuitive eating, they tend to gain weight. But they're very fast to come back or fall back into their old pattern because they're so scared to gain weight. But they don't know that it's a transitionary phase. Once the body starts getting that same amount of calories, it'll again balance out, and it'll become like a straight plateau. But they're
So,
scared of it.
yeah. So following up to that, you also like, children nowadays, like, we are exposed to all kind of foods here, junk food. You have all these international chains opening up in India, and that was not the case, like, a few years back while we were growing up. It was all Indian khana, and the best food was your friends' mom ka ghar ka khana, because
True.
that was your outing. So what I'm asking here is that kids are introduced to junk food from a very young age. So, and where does this, how does it come into intuition play? Because they are not having that intuition to have the junk food, and but they get so hooked on to it that later on they're asking, "Oh, can I get that French fry? Oh, can I please get that white sauce pasta and noodles and things like that?" So, what do you suggest that mothers should do in this scenario?
So largely, I think you have to lead by example. If and I mean, I can tell you this from my personal experience also, is that I'm not very big on eating out. So I like eating home cooked food, and I eat seasonal foods. I do a lot of fruits in my diet. So when the kids see this, that this is the family's culture or routine largely, they also tend to follow in those footsteps. So and you have to also respect them. So there are times, it's not like my daughter does not eat a burger or a pizza or any or a pastry or a donut, right? But now she also knows that, okay, these are, and we don't label them as good food, bad food, junk food, or healthy food, etc. These are called sometime foods. So you now, I think, because there's an advantage because I come from a nutrition background that I can explain it to her that these foods don't nourish you. These are only foods that you eat once in a while just to enjoy. So now she's come to a stage wherein, if she's had 3 days of, birthday parties back to back, she comes back and she tells me, okay, now this week, I really just want to eat home cooked food. So it's what they see at home. Now, if there is this whole conditioning also that happens, and in India, the big conditioning is the Sunday brunch, which is supposed to be this big, elaborate, high calorie, high fat meal.
Chole bhature.
Chole bhature with some halwa or jalebi or something. Or there is rajma chawal, still okay, but I'm just saying that, or
Yeah.
it'll be kachori in Rajasthan with something. So it's an elaborate meal. Now this becomes our conditioning. So in my house, what we've done is from day one, I broke this conditioning. There were times on Sunday when khichdi was being made and my daughter was eating khichdi. So there was no conditioning that Sunday hai, so I need to eat this.
It was on that special day.
Yeah. It's not. It's a regular day. We are eating khichdi or we're eating rice and dal, lentils, or vegetable, etc. But we're not. It's not like not make a big deal out of it.
To keep it simple,
And keep it simple, lead by example. So if you change the conversation around food at home, the children will follow that pattern. So, when people come and tell me that my child is very picky, he's a very picky eater, doesn't like to eat vegetables. So I'm like, are you a picky eater or is your husband a picky eater? Yeah, my husband is also a picky eater. I said, so the child is following. Or involve the child more. If the child does not enjoy beetroot in a salad form because it doesn't like the taste or the crunchiness, try and involve the child, make beetroot tikkis out of it, juice it up, make a soup, and ask the child to try it. And the key here is ask the child to try it. Once they try it, if they refuse to eat it, that no, I don't like it, don't force it. Say, okay, let's try something else, some other version. So in this, what you're doing is you're respecting and honoring their opinion. You're not forcing it down on them. So that they don't become rebellious around it, that, oh, I'm never going to touch beetroot.
make a pleasant experience for them.
Yes. It should be a very normal experience.
And it is also a wholesome food. Like you get all the nutrients from food itself. Because, like Saiba was mentioning, I've had experience with a few dietitians or nutritionists, I should say, who would give specialized diets and along with prescribed lots of supplements along with it. Vitamin C, vitamin D, and B12 and all that. So, how important are they, or what role they play when you prescribe a diet chart for them?
Well, the proof is in the pudding. The answer is in the name itself. It's a supplement. It's supposed to supplement your diet. It's not a magic pill. I also consume a lot of supplements. I also prescribe a lot of supplements to my clients, but on on need basis if they need it. Not everyone needs all kinds of supplements, right? But if you're not going to clean up your lifestyle and your diet, these supplements are not going to help. And there are a lot of supplements now in the market which we don't need. It's a waste. Something like glutathione, which is an antioxidant, but actually if you take an oral supplement, it does not get absorbed by the body. So there is no point in taking it. And these supplements are expensive. So people are not aware of what kind of supplements, if we need them or we don't need them. But first, clean up your diet and your lifestyle. When I say lifestyle, include, like I said, work on your sleep, hydration, your gut health, your exercise. Once you have all of this, then we see. Now, vitamin D, 90% or more of Indians are deficient in vitamin D. So you need to supplement for that, which is fine. There's a certain category of people who are vegetarians or vegans, or people who are elderly, who are deficient in B12. Elderly because their stomach acid drops with age, and then even dietary B12 is not absorbed by the body. So you need to supplement. So it has to be, when you need it, you supplement with those supplements. Otherwise, there's no point popping pills.
Not a blanket prescription, which usually nutritionists give that.
Never.
Because I've also come up with... Sorry, Shreesh, you continue.
No, please. So I was just want to link it with that. You've done your nutrition course from abroad, and you've stayed in India. You prescribed Indian food, which is generally used. So, but most of the nutritionists I've seen are prescribing European diets, and social media also trends keto or Mediterranean diets, or
Mediterranean,
maybe
yeah.
intermittent dieting, or maybe sometimes the trend starts of eating every couple of hours and so and so. So, how sustainable or how good are these diets actually?
If you're talking specifically for weight loss, then they're not sustainable, and these fat diets never work. These shortcuts, and because actually the thing is, these are all good for marketing, right? It's good to make money. It's good for business, for sure. But these are not good for your overall health in the long run. Keto diets, yes, if you have epilepsy, we will prescribe a ketogenic diet, because that's the research is available to show positive benefits of ketogenic diet. For weight loss, never. And that's one way of even identifying your nutritionist or a dietitian. If somebody is prescribing you ketogenic diets for weight loss, you should just pick up your bag and run. You don't want to ruin your health there. Mediterranean diet has shown benefits. Again, in Mediterranean diet includes good quality protein and good quality fats and whole grains, a lot of fiber. So there's nothing wrong with that diet at all, right? What was the other diet we were talking about? Intermittent fasting. Again, done right, it is good. Not done right, it is not good for your health. People, now this Western trend of intermittent fasting where you're killing or suppressing your hunger with cups and cups of black coffee because you're going to break your fast at 1 o'clock is not helpful. The point is you need to break your fast when your body tells you that it is hungry. So whether the body is hungry at 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock in the morning, you need to break your fast. Then you figure out when you're finishing your dinner. You can't be eating your dinner at 11 o'clock in the night and then breaking your fast at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's crazy. You're going to eventually end up with, insulin resistance because you're messing up your hormone health with all of this. Especially women, I always tell women that please don't go beyond 14 hours of fasting. And when you are in your menstrual phase and your luteal phase, which is 1 week before your menstrual phase, bring it down to 12 hours. So, but and the kind of food you include in your eating window is also important. You can't, if you're going to eat, burgers and pizzas, refined food and processed or ultra processed food in that eating window, it's not nourishing your body. So basic question to ask is, am I eating to nourish my body or am I eating just for pleasure and for taste?
So this is basically a good check before you start eating your meal. Like what is your goal right now? Like is it because you're hungry or you feel like eating a certain something? As you give us an example of your gulab jamun likes.
But then what is propagated these days, and especially in social media, that Indian diets are not complete diets, not wholesome. They can't make you healthy, and then we need to import those fancy diets from abroad. So where have we faltered in our ancient patterns of eating? Why is it so believed?
See, I think the ancient or traditional eating patterns were fabulous, and they used to finish their dinner by sunset and break their fast in the morning. We were fasting for 12, 14 hours.
Absolutely.
So we forgot that. We started socializing. We started having alcohol, eating, these heavy, high fat, high carb processed food late at night. And that starts to wreck your metabolism, your health, your hormone health, all of that. Right. So if you actually go back to traditional eating patterns, they're very good and largely balanced. And I still tell people that it's a privilege for us in India that we still get seasonal produce. Otherwise, if you travel abroad, you have mangoes available all year long. So there is now, I think we are blessed that we get this, we still get vegetables as per the season and fruits as per the season. We know, okay, this is the time that strawberries are in the market. And March, strawberries are going to go. April, we start looking forward for mangoes. So I think these are things that we still follow and we should continue to follow in our regular routine. And also eating freshly cooked food, eating in the oils that we used to traditionally use. Mustard oil, desi ghee are okay. We don't need these fancy oils for our food or for our cooking. We don't. Yes, if we talk about protein, maybe the Indian vegetarian diet is protein deficient, especially if you don't include dairy.
Mhm.
People who don't include dairy, don't do paneer, don't do curd or milk, their diets will be largely protein deficient. But otherwise, if you are including good quality, either dairy or animal protein, you're good. You can get all your protein needs also from your diet.
That itself.
So, Simon, going back to the supplements, there are also like supplements which also claim to kind of fill in like 90 vegetable nutrients in just one capsule. And should people follow for that? What is the reality there?
Eat more food that grows from the earth and less packets and packages. I always tell people, please eat the carrots, eat the cucumbers, eat the spinach, eat your methi, whatever is available, because the phytonutrients that are there in your vegetables and when you're cooking them, the spices that we use. Now, you start popping these pills, which are green vegetables in a capsule. Then you will start taking curcumin, which is a compound found in haldi. So again, you're just popping. Instead, imagine, how we cook. It's good oil, then we use jeera, which is cumin, which helps in digestion. You're using green vegetables, you use haldi, which is turmeric, and you're using ginger, you're using garlic. We are mixing all of this, and all the phytonutrients from this together, they work in your body. In isolation, they don't function that well. For instance, curcumin has become such a rage outside India,
Yeah, it has,
but
yeah.
if it's not monitored, because where
It
is
can be
your,
poisonous. Yeah,
it
yeah.
can really harm your liver health. So people don't understand these things. They just keep, it's not good to keep popping pills just because it's available, because it's not, they don't need any sort of regulatory, whatever certification. They're just available over the counter.
Cyber, we've talked about a lot about information, how the diets work, what to eat, what's good, about sweets, which is, I think, was something that I was looking forward to know about because I have a massive sweet tooth. The weight loss and everything there. What I want to know is, what is your journey? What change are you looking to bring to this world as a
Um,
nutritionist?
I think, just helping people and educating people on the right subjects of nutrition and helping them, heal their relationship with food and with their body. I think that is something that I really hope I'm able to do through my profession. So that's largely, I just want people to have a good, healthy relationship with their body and with food.
Okay.
And how important is this relationship when it comes to their lifestyle issues like hypertension, diabetes,
So these
PCOS?
are all, like you said, these are lifestyle disorders, right? Metabolic
Mm-hmm.
disorders, which can be controlled. So if you are pre-diabetic or you are pre-hypertensive, or I think it's a very good idea to make like a family health chart wherein you go. You work backwards. So you have yourself and then your siblings, your parents, your both side of grandparents, all of that, and figure out what were the ailments that they suffered from. Right? That'll give you a little idea of what are what is your risk of developing certain diseases. For instance, my side of the family, both paternal, maternal, hypertension is prevalent, very prevalent, right? So I know that I may be at a higher risk of developing hypertension. So you start controlling and take preventative measures so that you don't become hypertensive. So you need to understand, and if you're pre-diabetic or pre-hypertensive, you can, with your changes in your lifestyle and your diet, you can reverse it, control it, delay the progress. All of that is very possible.
But it should be done under the supervision of a qualified nutritionist
Of
because.
course, always. And in conjunction with a doctor. Nowadays, the good change that I'm noticing is that doctors also have started sending people to nutritionists, that go to your nutritionist and then, change your lifestyle before we put you on medication. Otherwise, earlier people were put on medication immediately by doctors. But now that trend is also changing, which is, a welcome change.
And the women who are in that perimenopause stage, when there is no significant change in their eating habits, there is no significant change in their exercise patterns, but they suddenly start gaining weight, 5-7 kgs, they try everything, doesn't work, and then they give up, and then it goes out of hand.
So, see, perimenopause is a stage, again, it's a transitionary stage, which first happens in puberty. Puberty, it happens for both men and women, right? And it's a phase wherein girls tend to gain weight at that time also. Now, when perimenopause is almost, it can last from say 4 years to 10 years for a woman. And the average age is about 40, 42. But now, because of environmental and lifestyle changes, women are also experiencing perimenopausal symptoms as early as 35. And earlier, women used to menopause at say 50, 52. Now, women are menopausing at 47. Now, menopause is when you've not had a menstrual bleed for a complete year, for 12 months.
1
That's
year.
when you say that, okay, now you've menopaused. But before that, this transitionary phase can go on for a decade. Now, in this, it's a complete hormonal havoc. And it's not like on a weekly basis, which happens, but it's during the day, right? So it
Yeah.
becomes so important because progesterone, which is our good hormone, tends to decline first in the first half of perimenopause. And so what happens is progesterone drops, so estrogen, which is maybe at its own level, which is the other hormone, but because progesterone has dropped, you are put in an estrogen dominance phase. And now when you drink alcohol, so women tend to drink alcohol also, so you need to really monitor, because one drink of alcohol can increase your estrogen levels by 7%. So you're already in an estrogen dominant, so to say, stage, and so alcohol is not going to help. Now, estrogen leads to fat deposition. So fat deposition again produces estrogen. So it becomes a vicious cycle, which is why women, they say that my lifestyle hasn't changed, but I'm still gaining weight, right? And the second half of your perimenopause, your estrogen tends to drop. Now, when estrogen drops, it basically regularizes your insulin levels, right? Now, when estrogen drops, you're more prone to be insulin resistance. Now, that again will lead to weight gain. So we tell women that, okay, up 35, after 35, start, controlling. Now, when I work with a lot of women in their perimenopausal stage, I'm one of them, and I had also gained weight in the last 2-3 years. I'd gained about 5-6 kilos, and I have successfully dropped all of that weight. And it's so important to gain muscle mass, especially before this or during your perimenopausal phase, because after 30, women tend to lose muscle mass. So if you don't have muscle mass, eventually after 50, it's going to be very difficult. Then you are going to have more fat deposition. Your hormone health is going to be out of whack. Because what happens when you menopause is your estrogen drops, but your male hormone, which is testosterone, still stays elevated, which is why women tend to see, a lot of male tendencies like balding and a lot of fat deposition on their midsection. They have belly fat, all of those things, which usually are seen in men. So it's very important to make these lifestyle changes before perimenopause sets in, or even in your 40s. It's very important you just kind of, pull up your socks and clean up your life.
And for the women who couldn't do this, who were not aware of this, are already in that age of 50, 55, how should they move forward now?
Never late to start, but start under proper guidance. And again, it's difficult, but it's doable. I always tell women this, that just be patient. It's difficult, but it's doable. If I can do it with hypothyroidism, with Hashimoto's in perimenopause, I think anybody can do it.
And most of the women don't like to go to the gym. How would they get that muscle mass? They feel they'll become manly. Yeah, that's an issue.
There are ways. So see, walking is something that comes naturally to us humans, right? You can walk anywhere at any time, wherever you are in the world. I'm always very confident that one person can take out 30 to 60 minutes to walk. So now when you're walking, you can add weights. So you either get these weighted vests, you can wear a weighted vest, or you can wear ankle weights and wrist weights, so that you are, adding some resistance while you're walking.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that you can do.
So that's one way to.
There is always some way.
There's
You just
always
have
some
You just have
way.
to
there
look
is
for
a way.
it.
The way.
You have to look for it.
Yeah.
There's always a window open.
Yeah.
So I think we've done a lot of serious stuff today, and it's your turn now to bring that happiness, the happiness coach that you are.
Yeah. Let's start. Saiba, so we have some 5 light-hearted questions to ask, and then we'll go to closing of our session. Podcast, not session. Coaches have it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my first question is, if you have a book coming out in your life, what will the title of the book be?
Well, I don't know about the title of a book for my life, but I'm currently working on a book, and it's the working title is The Unfair 40s.
Wow.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Why unfair?
It is unfair for us women. So much happens in your 40s. All your work life, your personal life, everything is so demanding for women. Kids are going off to colleges. Work is demanding. Your parents are aging. You are just torn between so many things. And then there is perimenopause where your hormones are also jumping around. It's a mess.
It's like a pudding where
And
has
what
like a
about their
sprinkle.
what about their poor husbands who also have to bear the burnt of that mess?
I
Actually,
know. They just need to book a ticket, one-way ticket to somewhere.
maybe
All
that would
right.
be also mentioned in the book.
No, I think for the men, if they are aware of what is going on in a woman's life at this time, they just need to be a little more aware and
Patient,
supportive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are going to be days when she's going to be hyper and agitated and irritated. So they need to also understand that, okay, this is her 2 weeks when she's going to be like this. Let her be. And then you'll get 2 good weeks.
So it's a must
I
read
think I
for
should
men
make my
also.
husband talk to. I should make my husband talk to Sahiba for that.
And this book should be a
You're
must read
far
for men
away from
also.
menopause.
Yeah,
You're
Yeah,
far away
actually,
from
it's a great book. It's a great book. Men should also read it,
Yes.
absolutely.
right? Unfair 40s, guys.
I include a
Who's
chapter for men.
Yes, sure. Please do that.
their role in perimenopause.
Men who pause.
Yeah. Okay, now second question. It's ditch or pitch, right? So I'm going to say a few diets that is in trend, and you tell us if you do ditch it or pitch it. It's keto,
So this is for weight loss, right? Diets for weight
weight loss. Yeah, weight loss.
loss. Keto is
Keto,
absolutely ditch.
GM diet,
Ditch.
low carb diet,
Ditch.
Mediterranean diet,
Pitch.
intermittent fasting.
Partially pitch. If
What do
done.
you mean by partially pitch?
If done the right way, yes. Pitch.
All right. So, what is the funniest excuse you've ever heard from a client who didn't follow through your guidance?
My cook can't read English. So he made whatever he made.
So prepare a diet chart in Hindi.
Yeah, and I've done that, and I was like, it was a struggle for me. I said, I can't do it.
So
But
one more.
did you Google translate it?
I have no idea. I said, you figure out a way.
So I don't know whether Inayat has faced this or not, but I as a coach have faced it, and many other coaches have asked me, whenever we've had this intense coaching session, we feel very hungry, crave for food. Why is it that? We're sitting there, we're just talking, and then suddenly we feel craving for having something to eat.
Maybe because you are mentally very active, so your body is using up energy, right? Even which is what is BMR, which is basal metabolic rate. Even when you're not doing anything, your body is using up calories for energy production, right? Like right now we're talking, so there is a lot of activity internally that's happening. So you will feel hungry after this. But again, also if you're doing a session for say 1 or 2 hours, right? So after 2 hours, your whatever meal you've eaten, depending on what you've eaten, so you will metabolize that and you will feel hungry. And you do get drained emotionally, mentally, even if you're physically just seated. there is some sort of draining that's happening.
Activity going on, yeah, internally.
Activity going on,
Which is
absolutely.
why I said, let's finish by 7:30. Well, it's my dinner time. I know I'm going to be hungry by 7:30.
Okay, so what one superpower you want to have as a nutritionist?
I think I can just whisper in my clients' ears the right thing at the right time. People who, so that they can heal their relationship with food. So
Mm-hmm.
people who are very scared or get guilty after eating, say, some sort of food that they enjoy, if I can just whisper in their ears that you have
Mm-hmm.
permission to eat this,
Mm-hmm.
and they can enjoy it or don't feel guilty, something like that. Or people who find it difficult to kind of assess if they're eating to nourish their body or harming their body, if I can just whisper that a question, that is this food nourishing you? So if they can just pause and figure out that what is it that they're doing.
Like the conscious voice.
Yeah.
Saiba, I loved your the thing that funniest excuse you've ever heard. I really want to know if there's another one.
No, this is it. But I can tell you one more wherein so a client once asked me that can I replace my vegetable with paneer.
Hmm.
So no, so she asked me what can I replace. Say, okay, let's take an English specific example like cauliflower. What can I replace cauliflower with? So I said you can replace it with any other vegetable. So if it's say spinach or carrots or peas, whatever you want to make. She said, can I replace it with paneer? I said, paneer is not a vegetable. Does it grow from the earth? She's like, but my sabji wala sells it. I said, just because paneer is available at your sabji wala, the vegetable vendor's cart, doesn't make it a vegetable.
So tomorrow, if
I
Sabjiwala
feel
starts selling those ice creams, she
I
would
know.
replace vegetables with
Yeah,
ice
can I
creams.
replace my cauliflower with ice cream?
I love this. This is like the funniest thing. So what is the biggest takeaway you want our listeners to take away from our conversation today?
I would say there is no good food or bad food. The control lies with you. You are the boss. You decide and ask this question: am I eating to nourish myself, or is this going to harm me? And you will get your answer, and you'll do better. And if you really want to do better, keep that why in mind. Nothing can stop you.
All right, all right.
Wonderful.
And thank you. And what is your biggest takeaway from our conversation today, Saiba?
My takeaway from the conversation.
Yeah,
It
because
was
you shared
very
a
nice.
lot.
Yeah, but it was a very good, fun conversation and very good questions. I would say very relevant. I think we missed talking about one question though, which is coming to my mind, which is Ozempic,
Oh,
which is
yes.
trending. But maybe we'll leave it for another time.
Yeah,
But
we did
yeah,
address it a little bit there, but you were
little
talking
bit,
about
yeah.
how, yeah.
But I
Hmm.
think before I close, because this is something which is important, I would tell people to not take it on their own. If you want to explore taking Ozempic, make sure you take it under proper guidance of a doctor
Hmm.
who knows what they're doing. And it has serious side effects, so don't just use it as a shortcut. It's okay for people who are elderly and obese and don't have the energy or the ability to engage in physical activity. It's okay for them, but for young people, don't take it out of laziness.
Right. Saiba, I know we've taken a lot of your time and we're running short of time, but there's one thing which comes to my mind. I think we should address that also. So, very recently, Vidya Balan lost quite a bit of weight, and there were a lot of reels where she was telling that she tried a lot of weight loss mechanisms, but actually, it was inflammation in the body that she was not able to lose weight. And people usually, laymen, don't understand what that really means. If you could just throw some light on that.
So, inflammation, there's acute inflammation, there's chronic inflammation. Acute inflammation is which is temporary, right? If you fall down or if you cut your finger while chopping vegetables, you'll bleed, it'll be red, and that's your body's, your immune response is then active, right? And it tries to heal it in different ways. So, you feel redness, swelling, pain, all of these are symptoms or signs of acute inflammation. Now, chronic inflammation is very low grade inflammation, which is setting in your body, and it continues for months and years, and it usually goes undiagnosed because the symptoms are they overlap with a lot of other symptoms. So symptoms like fatigue, low energy levels, low immunity, falling ill very often, headaches, unexplained joint pains. People think, "Pata nahi, I don't know what's going on with me," or maybe they think it's part of life that these little pains stay. All of these things are low grade inflammation. Now, even the cholesterol markers that we have in our blood work, these are all inflammatory markers. And this CRP, this ESR, they show that there is inflammation. So you need to correct all this. Then, because this inflammation then travels to your gut. Your gut is inflamed. So when your gut is inflamed, the intestinal barrier gets disrupted, so there's more permeability. You have a leaky gut. So all these pathogens, undigested food starts to enter your bloodstream, which again is identified by your body as foreign bodies. And again, your immune system is hyperactive. So that, it becomes a vicious circle where your inflammation just keeps on increasing. And this over the years will lead to weight gain, of course, and a lot of health problems, cardiovascular problems, cancer, diabetes, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune conditions. So, and stress also is a very big contributor. So these are the two types of inflammation. So you need to correct. So when we say that, people with chronic inflammation, you need to calm the immune system down. So you need to first, so I tell people that there are environmental factors and there are lifestyle factors, right? So environmental factors we don't have much control over. Somebody like me who lives in Delhi, the AQI is really poor. Okay, I have an option of going to the hills for say a month or two, but I cannot uproot myself and go to the hills permanently, right? Because I have work here, I have a daughter, goes to school, I have to live in Delhi. But I can make changes to my lifestyle, I can make changes to my diet, which will help in lowering my inflammation. Now, I do have Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition, again, inflammatory condition. So you try to calm your immune system. You do the things that will help your immune system to calm down and bring down the inflammation.
Absolutely. So thank
Shirish,
you.
are we done?
Yeah, we're done. So yeah, there's so much to talk, there's so much to ask, but yeah, we are running. Maybe we'll have another episode on that. So, but before we just close this session, like we've become coaches now, so we have got this habit of asking, what is the greatest takeaway we have? And Inayat has already asked you. So I would like Inayat to tell us what is the greatest takeaway she had from the session of today, or conversation of today rather. Aadat pad gaya.
I would say my greatest takeaway, but I love the story of please आप हिंदी में दे सकते मेरा cook cannot read in English. I think this is the story that I'm going to use to make my friends laugh. Yeah, this is the story I'm going to use to make my friends laugh. So I love that.
Okay, and so takeaway for me would be very simple. Take care of your calories and pounds will take care of themselves. I think that is what Sahiba means actually. So thank you so much, Sahiba, for so much of information, so much of education that you've given us, and listeners also for the patience that you've shown to listen to us. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave a review on Apple Podcast, and follow us on Spotify. Thank you, and thank you, Sahiba. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure, and I'm glad our paths crossed.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.